I felt points inside me, so that's good.
By the way, 1 week ago, checking my calendar, I saw that I left a message for myself 3 years ago.
Wait, was it a message or an email?
It was a calendar event. It was, it was like this full day event that you put at the top of your calendar that you never checked.
Very weird medium for a message.
Exactly. And the title was 3 years ago. It was not even I could have not clicked on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was checking my calendar and I saw this weird event called 3 years ago and I clicked on it. It was a small message of me 3 years ago, bored out of my head when I was working at Deezer, writing about my life there. And I was just going to move in with my ex. And I was just talking about that and how I was bored and how I had a shitty job. And I hoped to my
time
future,
capsule.
Yeah, to my future self that I would have a better life by then. And here we are in 2020.
Do you have a better life?
Still in lockdown for the last 8 months. I guess I have a better life than that. I have a better job. I have a better flat. I have but the lockdown in 2020, I don't know. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird year.
Yeah, it's hard to measure against that.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it the first time you're doing
yeah, no, but I completely forgot about it.
Okay, so maybe you did a lot of them and you just forgot all the time.
Maybe. I guess so. Maybe. I don't know. I have no fucking clue. I completely forgot about it. But I was so stupid in that data because at the end I was I'm sure you will hate yourself for not writing more at that point when you will check that in 3 years because it was so short. And I was
oh, okay. Because what you said before made me think that it was long.
No, it was it was not super long. It was.
So you talked about a lot of topics, but very briefly.
Yeah, exactly. I was kind of bullet points. But what kills me is the postscriptum at the end saying that oh, you'll hate me for not writing more. And I was what a stupid guy I was 3 years ago. Yeah, I hate you. It was.
I guess you do know yourself.
It was a really good idea. Why didn't you do it well? So now I have in my to-dos let's write a long letters for myself 3 years from now.
Do you think you're not stupid anymore? Do you think you grew up since then?
Yeah, because I will write a fucking book now. But I don't know what I'm gonna write about because it's kind of it's a weird mindset to think okay, what I'm gonna write for myself in 3 years.
Yeah.
You can't really teach anything to your future self.
No, I mean the goal is to make you smile, right? To bring you a little happiness and throw back oh, this was going on, etc.
But I would have loved that from myself 20 years ago.
In the future. You want to receive messages from the future?
That would be great.
The other way around. I mean, if you want, you can send a message to yourself 20 years from now.
I think I'll do it. Yeah, I think 20 years is a good period for you to change.
So do you feel you're not very different from the guy who wrote the message?
I don't think so. I don't know. I think I'm pretty consistent. In a good way, not in a bad way.
I mean, he knew what your reaction would be.
Yeah, exactly.
He knows you so well.
And it was just 3 years ago. So yeah, I've changed a bit because I went through a relationship, I went through a job. Obviously, I changed a bit, but I'm a bit wiser maybe.
But do you think it's important that you change because the circumstances change enough to give you a good topic of conversation, right? Oh,
yeah, no, clearly.
Oh, this and this changed.
No, clearly. Okay, but you told me earlier that you wrote that kind of message before, no?
Yeah, I do that a lot actually.
A lot?
I don't know. It's fun. Yeah. So I'm using a service that's called Future Me. So I'm using Future Me, and I send an email to myself 1 year in the future or variable dates and stuff like that. And we're basically having a conversation through time, but it's a bit weird because you cannot really react to what the person said because the person that's going to read it is not the same as the person who sent it. So it's more of like a chain of one-way messages.
Oh, wait, what? Like you're not receiving it? I don't understand.
Oh no, you are receiving it.
Okay. You're talking about like yourself changing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. I was a bit confused.
You can't ask question and expect an answer from the same person who wrote the initial email, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's not really good for, I tend to write it kind of like a letter, so like, hey, how's it going, blah blah blah, but that is a bit weird because you can't have a conversation.
But you could write it as like only yes no question and answer like both responses and then like have a weird conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Maybe I'll try that next time. I haven't done it in a while. At some point, I noticed something fun is that so I have a very weird memory. Sometimes it works. For some other things, it doesn't work at all. So for time capsule, I'm really good at forgetting about them, to the point that I noticed at some point that if I was writing a note to myself in the morning, I most often forgot it by the evening because it's the morning. I'm still half asleep. So at some point I was making time capsules one day long.
What? But like you've trained yourself to forget, no? Because like that seems very weird.
And can you remember all the details of your morning?
I mean, like writing a letter, like, yeah, I can remember.
Well, not a letter, but like a note, a post-it, something like that.
Okay, so then maybe.
Yeah, right. I didn't sit down for 3 hours and then like forgot completely that it happened.
Yeah, I was like, maybe you should make that check by someone.
First, we should say that in response to all the problems we've seen on iTunes and Podfollow, etc., we have a new hosting service.
Yeah, and it's working now.
It should work very smoothly. It seems very good. They will know better than us the ins and outs on each platform, except YouTube. You have to be big before they let you post on YouTube.
Yeah, but we can do that ourselves, can't we?
Yeah. But that also means that you should share this podcast to all of your friends and invite them so that we can automate our posting to YouTube.
Just for that, we don't really care about you listening.
Yeah, I mean it's a good it's as good a goal as any, right?
Yeah, I guess so. So follow up. Do you have any? Like actual follow-up?
I have a little bit of follow-ups, yeah. So in the last episode, we talked about anti-rationality, right? If there was some kind of anti-rationality vibe in media, fiction storytelling, something like that.
Yeah, I guess so.
I received a question. So we saw that we talked a lot about rationality, and we saw that it could be used for any goal. Something that seems irrational can be actually rational for a weird goal or something like that. But can it be used for the explicit goal of being irrational? Can you be irrational in the most rational way? For instance, I see in your silence that you may ask, why would you ever do that? So maybe you would do that to prove that you're not deterministic or something like that. Like to as an artistic statement. What would rationality in the service of irrationality be like?
I'm not sure how would like that look like. What would you do?
I mean, I think you can't do it. So my answer to this might be, I don't know, I haven't thought about it too much, but it seems like it's a contradiction in terms, right? Whatever you do will be the result of the rational thinking. Yeah. So let's assume this hypothesis. Mm-hmm. If whatever you do, you end up doing it out of rationality, so you come to an absurd conclusion, like textbooks my demonstration, unless maybe you do absolutely nothing.
But even then, like doing nothing.
But then it's the logical conclusion. It's the logical conclusion of my argument. So I guess you just need to kill yourself, but you can't because like you absolutely can't do anything, including not doing anything.
That's so
very nice.
I love it. It's a moot argument. It's a moo argument. Okay, that was an interesting little thought.
The question is a bit nonsensical, so we solved it entirely.
That's fair in this podcast.
We also talked about dystopias, right? And how dystopia were never really completely rational because they were optimizing for an arbitrary factor, missing on what's really important for human stability of mind for humans.
Yeah, for humans.
And related to that, something dawned on me. So, on one of our conversations offline, you told me that one of the things people were the most worried about for COVID, more than health, was the economy. So the obvious immediate interrogation was like, how can people care more about the economy than about their health? And I think there is a nice parallel to these dystopias we mentioned, because what came out of the last episode is that a lot of these dystopias robbed the sense of meaning from people's life. And so I think that you can see it in this COVID situation, because it seems to me that what the economy means to a lot of people is the meaning of gives a sense to pointless jobs. Like, for instance, I was walking in the street seeing these stores half empty and thinking about being a clerk at this store. It must be so weird to spend your day in an empty store.
Empty as in like no people in it, or empty as in no project in it?
No people in it. So I mean, the COVID situation brought to the forefront, I think, a lot of absurdities in the system, and economy is the rationale that justifies the meaning of the system. Kind of like, why do you wake up every morning to go to a job you might not love?
That makes sense.
It's for the economy, and so I think that's why people may care a lot about it.
That's interesting. I never thought about it that way. I think, yeah, you might be right. Like, it just because like what's interesting about COVID and how we are living right now is like we actually see that a lot of jobs are completely useless. Like, we're not missing them that much.
Yeah, or at the very least, can perfectly be remote, right? A lot of office time is useless.
So yeah, it makes sense that like we need something to make that useful in some sort of way, and we invented a system to like show the usefulness of it.
I think that might be why people care about the economy. And so the reason why I thought about it in light of the last episode is because we kept talking how important this sense of meaning was.
So the market is our new...
The economy is the meaning.
But the economy is not the meaning. The economy is what... It's giving symbolism into like your action.
But yeah, following this thought, I spent hours researching to find a video that I watched kind of innocuously without thinking too much about it, and clearly it stuck to my mind. So that's also why I wanted to talk about it, because I struggled for it. It was a lecture from Professor Ken James at the Albert Ludwigs Universität Freiburg called Nietzsche, Trump and Brexit. You can find it on YouTube, and I'll link it in the show notes. And the whole point of this lecture and why it stuck with me is that he was highlighting how populist movements like Trump or Brexit really hooked on that sense of meaning, giving purpose to people, like, oh, let's kick those foreigners, whereas the left tends to forget about this dimension of meaning and stick to figures, fact, and rationality. So maybe the left is trying to build a system that works but forgets about meaning, kind of like those dystopias we discussed.
Okay, but it goes so much into our actual like subject for the day that I'm not sure I want to...
Does it?
Yeah, because I do think so. Today we're gonna talk about propaganda a bit, and I do think that what the left is not doing well is propaganda.
Yeah, I guess it ties back into propaganda. So without further ado, let's segue into the main episode. This episode is brought to you by that odd, unshakable feeling that someone is watching you right now. But there's no one else besides you. We know you'd rather forget it, but consider paying more attention to that odd, unshakable feeling that someone is watching you right now. Today, we're gonna talk about villains and propaganda, exactly. And specifically, the question, what exactly is a villain? Because While watching, I don't know, movies, I often talk about Disney as being a good example of that. But let's take Disney, for example, because it's easier to explain with an example. When you watch it as a kid, who's the bad guy is obvious, who's the good guy is obvious. And when you visit it back as an adult, it's a famous meme and a lot of people have been talking about it. It's not that obvious anymore. Often the bad guy kind of has a point. Often the situation is not that clear. So my question was like, is it just a matter of format? Can you make anything be a villain if you frame it with the right colors? And so to explore that, you've done some in-depth research.
In depth, I've watched one movie, super in depth. I wanted to say I rewatched, but actually I think it's the first time I actually watched that film. I watched Aladdin, which is weird because I kind of know the song by heart by now. So when I watched the movie, I was like, I never saw this. I actually never saw Aladdin before. So that was a weird experience.
So you won't have the nostalgia goggle blurring your point of view on Aladdin.
No nostalgia whatsoever. And so I have a lot of thought about like, okay, first thing about...
So I think Aladdin is a good example of that.
I don't think it is.
Okay, so let me first introduce and then we can hear your rant maybe.
Okay.
I think, for instance... like you can really make a case for the fact that, so in Aladdin, for those of you who haven't seen it, is the story of...
No one ever.
So, what?
No one except me 2 days ago.
Yeah, everyone has seen it. So it's set up in this kingdom of Agrabah, and the main antagonist is Jafar. And Jafar's point is that he wants to be in charge, essentially.
Yeah.
I agree that it's not the best example for a misunderstood villain, but you can still make a case that the current sultan is very inept as his job.
Well, we don't know that.
It's like just like lounging around all day, very disconnected.
But do we know that? We don't.
We don't know much about the sultan except that he wants to marry his daughter. So it's not the best example, but I think
really
it can
not
still
the best
work.
example because Jafar is just I want to have power and only power. And actually, I think like there's a good point to make on what makes a villain is like usually in storytelling you don't have the full view of the villain point, meaning like they just show you their like bad action and they don't really tell you why they're doing that. And like it's the thing in Aladdin, like you don't know why Jafar wants the power, you don't know why he's doing all of this.
So are you saying that it leaves it kind of like open for me to put in my like, oh, he's worried about the country?
Yeah, you could. The problem is because you don't know and you only see him doing like vile thing, you don't really push that sort of thought in Jafar. You just put like, okay, he's a villain that just want power for power, which makes no sense because like that never happens. Like it rarely happens.
So it's more of a matter of means than a matter of goals then.
In Aladdin, I think it is. It's only a matter of, I think if it was framed as Jafar wants to take power because the current sultan is doing a bad job, then I think as an adult seeing him like killing 1 or 2 people, we would be like, maybe like it's kind of worth it, like whatever. But the problem is it's not. So you just like seeing that guy killing people for no fucking reason, and obviously you're saying it's bad.
Yeah, I wish you had seen the Lion King instead, where the point is made very much clearer, because the guy who wants to overthrow the Lion King just wants all animals to share equal rights and destroy the lion hegemony. But so it's true that you can have villains with a wide range of backstories and reasons. But so you do have, I guess, both. You have some villains that have reasons and some villains that are just pure evil. But what makes them villain, I think, is in the portrayal more than the goals.
In Disney, like it's a big thing that like villains are usually not good looking. Villains are actually like using
exactly.
Yeah, they're actually like usually they use like darker color palette.
I think we can, if you want, well, I had it on my list, we can take a few minutes maybe to go over what this means, like what the ways that they are portrayed. It's like darker color palettes, often like green and purple.
Green and purple, even like the sing, like, so in Disney, like they always sing, like I forgot about that. There's so much singing. What's interesting, I think, like the song use like
and like lower tones, lower voices.
yeah,
I
exactly.
noticed.
Yeah. I wanted to say that. Yeah, lower tones.
And something like super interesting that I thought of while thinking about that was rewatching the portrayal of villains like that, is they are often portrayed with like deformed traits, like non-humans, as far, like further away from humans, like a bit different. And so there is a very big question here of how difference is used to single out the villain, and how it kind of like trains you to hate what's
Actually,
different.
that's super interesting. And I don't know if you know that, but I've watched Aladdin on Disney Plus. Before the movie, there's a disclaimer. And the disclaimer is some character or action portrays some stereotypical traits that can be hurtful, something like that. And it was not okay by then, and it's not okay today. But we decided to put it nonetheless because of history or whatever. Fine, but you're still doing.
That's interesting. I didn't know they were doing that. But yeah, the thing is, like, the portrayal of the stereotypes is still at one level that I would call like conscious in a way, whereas like making the villain kind of like, I don't know, fat, deformed, blobby, whatever, is more like unconsciously training you to using your fear of the different for narrative purposes, which reinforces thereby and validates that fear of the different.
Well, obviously, like there's something about like being different, but like there's also something about being ugly, meaning like you know that like even at a young age there's a beauty factor that is completely insane about like kids that are more beautiful are more intelligent just because adults think that they're more intelligent, so they like spend more time like talking to them, like teaching them, blah blah blah, and you actually have like a feedback loop that like makes them more intelligent.
Yeah, I think that's basically what I was thinking about, right? Because you can see beauty as the norm that people are aspiring to, and different as deviating from it. I mean, you see Jafar, he looks bad, and it turns out that you were right to judge him on the stereotypes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's clearly a reinforcing loop. And like in each, actually, when you think about it, like that's interesting actually. Yeah, there's not one Disney movie where the villain is actually a beautiful person.
Well, there is stuff like Snow White, where the queen was jealous of Snow White's beauty, so presumably she was second in line.
But that's interesting that like they actually say it. It's actually a talking point. Like it's like, am I the most beautiful woman in the country? No. Okay, let's kill them. It shows to kids that like beauty is a thing to aspire to, which is a bit weird.
I mean, it was another time. It's a bit dated, but it was. I mean, I think it's still the case in a way, except less explicitly. It mirrors in an explicit fashion what other villain portrayal just hint at unconsciously. We deviated a bit, so we talked about villains and what cinematographically makes a villain, and I really like the point that it's using the bias we have against the unknown, the difference, and leveraging that. And we talked about beauty and the human norm.
I think it's like really a common thing, because even in like fantasy, orcs are always really, really bad looking.
They're bad looking for your standards. For their standards, they're pretty much good looking.
But if you take elves, usually in fantasies are not that they're like, they can be villain, and they're like usually very beautiful.
I mean, yeah, you have the dark elf stereotype. I don't think any of what we're talking about is a strict rule.
No, but like what I mean about elves is there's also like the complete opposite thing. Like being super beautiful in storytelling can also be used as like being cold.
A red flag.
Yeah, like being cold and like, I don't know, like far from like the common.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That might be why I unconsciously were talking about deviating from the norm more than getting close to an ideal.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Because deviating even in too well is not good. And maybe the Snow White Queen fits more in that. I don't know.
I agree. I think it's deviating from the norm, which is a bit sad, but yeah.
I mean, Jafar is the only person in all of Agrabah who wears black and who's friendly with parrots. I don't know. He's deviating from the norm. He has a parrot.
No, but like Jafar, I think like really you can't. The movie doesn't let you think about Jafar as having any sort of rationale behind his action, except he wants power. So you can't. It's not even about being beautiful. Like he could be the most beautiful being. He could be completely normal in any other way. It's just like his action is so strongly bad in and of themselves that like you just can't think about him as a good person.
Yeah. So that's interesting. It's a moral model in which the weight of the action outweigh whatever goal he may ever have. But don't you find it weird that clearly you're supposed to still like Iago?
Iago is a parrot?
The parrot?
How can you remember that? He's a pet.
Pets are always nice by definition. Pets can't be evil.
No, but like you don't give them that. Like the thing with pet, I think in movies and like even in real life, you don't give them agency. So even if he's talking, like he doesn't really have any agency. So like he's a comic relief, and as such, like you like him because he makes jokes. He can't do anything by himself.
Jafar is the agency, and he's bad because he chooses to do bad actions, whatever the ends might be.
Yeah, I think so.
But that's not always the case, and that's what I'm a bit
clearly
puzzled of. Although, I mean, I guess it's I don't know. Then I don't know if Disney is the best portrayal for that, because Disney's villains are often use bad actions, such as framing the death of your father for the Lion King. What do you think about The Little Mermaid, for instance? Do you remember? This witch wants to steal the Little Mermaid's voice, so she has her sign a contract, giving her legs in exchange for her voice.
Yeah.
A kind of Faustian contract. And I mean, some might call that exploitative, some might just call that free capitalism, but it's clearly framed as bad.
But why is she picking that deal?
Because she wants legs to go on the surface for true love.
And why can't she find true love in the fucking ocean?
Because she found the one. She saw the one from far away. It's a bit stalkery.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I think like a trade is I don't know. Like I'm not sure. Like I think I need more details about this trade. The trade in itself is fine. Like I mean, like you're removing a body part to give another body part, which seems like kind of fair.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know.
Like it's just a law of conservation. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah, see, it seems just like a very fair trade.
Like in the actual story, it's a worse deal than that, because like when she walks.
Yeah, she's hurt every time she puts the foot on the ground in the fairy tale.
This trade would be a bit like.
All of this to have a chance at shagging a beautiful man. There is beauty again.
Yeah. I don't know. Like it's love in Disney movies weirdly framed each time. Like it's always, oh, you fall in love at the first sight, and then like you don't really.
Except in Frozen. No, but it's true that love is the ultimate value kind of to aspire to, even in Frozen, except just not like the classic heterosexual love. And that's also a very interesting thing to see with respect to propaganda, because this love that you see in this kind of tales is always motivated by the beauty, as we said. Well, echoing what we said.
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes it a bit superficial, sure. But it's implicitly the goal of the story and the justification of everything, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's always like love conquers all.
For sure.
And that is exactly my little plug moment, what Zizek calls pure ideology in his Pervert Guide to the Cinema. He highlights that even in Stalin's propaganda movie, for instance, Stalin congratulates a couple getting back together. And so we mentioned beauty, but love is maybe also a very strong factor of propaganda.
I would have thought that like for Stalin or like for any other like totalitarian country, love is not that important. I would have thought like making kids are more important than like actual love.
I mean, we'd need to...
Or love for the totalitarian figure, I guess. But love in itself?
I gave the shortened version because what Zizek is actually saying is that like this instance of love in Disney or this instance of love in the Stalin movie is objet petit a. and might be present differently. And I guess it would be love for the nation in Nazi Germany or something like that. But it's kind of a tension towards an ideal of beauty again. Like it's a tension towards an absolute.
I think like beauty is one of these like absolute that is very well defined as an absolute, not very well defined as a concept, but like very well defined as like it's one of the absolutes that exists, which is kind of rare. Like you don't have that many concepts that tend toward being absolute in itself.
Well, that's God. Maybe that's why they keep killing each other over it.
But exactly. But after God, basically after God, there's beauty, which is a bit like beauty is a very strong word.
Yeah, I mean it's very close to God in a way.
I didn't think we would talk about beauty that much.
We're talking about the cinematic language of propaganda, so I guess like I didn't see it coming either, but
that makes sense, kind of.
This episode is brought to you by the absence of call to actions. You all know that you're supposed to like, subscribe, leave a good review on iTunes and such likes. So why does everyone keep reminding you of it? That's silly. We don't do that here. I wanted to bring back the question a bit so we talked about the cinematic language of being a villain and that it was pretty justified in some cases in Disney, in the Disney examples that we studied. But I wonder that if it is does the point still stand that it is necessarily justified? Like, couldn't you frame anything as a villain with this kind of cinematic tool? And can you make everything seem good or bad depending on the framing? I mean,
are you talking about the form alone, or are you talking also?
So my thinking related to this is that maybe most of the propaganda actually is not in what's being said in the content, but more just on the form and maybe even more on the framing, just the fact of talking about something as if it's important, as if it's a problem or something like that. So maybe most of the propaganda is in the unsaid and the assumptions, and consequently you can use the same format.
For sure you can frame anything as like bad if you want to.
I guess that's what propaganda is.
I wouldn't say exactly that, I think, because like propaganda, they don't frame stuff as bad just to frame stuff as bad. They just like frame stuff that are different with their thinking as bad. Like it's a matter of differentiation between what they're thinking and like what others are thinking, I guess, or to like use any one group of person or like one group of ideology as bad compared to like themselves. So it's more about, and it's keeping the point that you were saying earlier about like being different is bad. I think all propaganda is saying that any other stuff that what I am saying right now is bad.
So does the content actually matter in a way if you can say anything and it's opposite just by framing and cinematic format? Is it more of a like postmodernist kind of stuff where there is no good or evil and there's no absolute value?
The two things that kind of not boggle my mind, but like I found really interesting is gay marriage and cannabis legalization in the US. Like both of them like follow the same trends of acceptance. Meaning like before it was legalized, it was like 35%, 40% of the population were okay with it. And now that it legalized like state by state, you can see the actual like acceptance of the public go up so the law is first and then the acceptance is second.
Okay, so you have like early adopters, then the laws, then the bulk.
And then everyone is following. Like right now the legalization of marijuana is like 60%. Like 60% of the population are okay with it, which were not true like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I think like it's a sort of propaganda to show that people are okay with it before they're actually okay with it. And people are like, if everyone is okay with that, maybe I should.
I mean, even if we set aside the big word propaganda, the big P, it's a picture of framing, right? Before you frame it as a illegal activity, people are against it. And then you frame it as something that some people do and like... even before it's legal, just like not a crime, and it already pushes the tolerance. So my gut question to that is Okay, so how can we, like, what is the conclusion we should draw from all this for our daily lives? But do you have something you want to say?
Legalize first, think about it second.
I think what strikes me in all of this is that humans are very, very sensitive to the framing and the portrayal and all this implicit meta information that we don't actually get when you're watching, when you're paying attention to the content as you are, like the stuff that comes to you unconsciously, the normalization of things, etc.
But I think that's what's happening with news nowadays. Like if you're only watching one kind of news, like the portrayal is always the same. Like it normalizes any kind of thinking. Like even if you watch like liberal news or like conservative news, each time like you have this framing that is like very, very strong and you don't even see it by the end. You just like agree with it.
Yes, I guess the lesson here is to be really careful and question, like to try to be aware of the hidden assumptions and see when people are framed in dark and purple that maybe you should pay close attention. Maybe something is being fed to you.
If there's purple in the picture,
be careful.
Be careful. There might be propaganda.
But in a way, aren't we reinforcing the propaganda by telling people to be afraid of purple?
I mean, you have purple in your bedroom right now. I can see purple behind you. So
I do have purple. Maybe I'm evil.
I mean, like, we might need to stop this podcast now. I'm a bit afraid. But the thing is, I don't think any human is actually a villain in the sense of like being bad for being bad. Like, I don't think it exists at all.
Whereas it kind of exists in fiction, right?
Yeah, in fiction, yeah. But like, the sentence always assume positive intent, I think is an actual like truth. Like I do think that people always act for positive intent.
I agree. I would go even like my version of it is always assume incompetence rather than bad intent. Suboptimality. But do you think that this portrayal of villains, so the fact that we have villains in our story is detrimental to our behavior in the real world then, if they don't exist in the real world?
I think it helps us.
Do you think it pushes an agenda of adversariality?
I mean, it helps us make sense of the world.
But I still feel like this kind of adversarial, like this kind of Manichaeism is pushing an adversarial conception of mankind, which I'd rather not see in media.
Yeah, me too.
I wonder if we have less villain on screen, maybe we would be more inclined to look for the reasons behind their act.
For every bad action that you see on the show or on like the news, you need to think why this guy is doing that, why this woman is doing that, and I think you will like be better for it.
Yeah, we're interested. So let's do this little social experiment, and let's all post our stories of like let's all post one example that we saw in the comments, and we can see if everyone has reasons.
I mean, no one will do that, so they won't have any reasons, and you're a villain for it, and I'm not trying to understand why you're not doing it.
If you don't leave us a comment, you are the villain, the true villain, because but yeah, please let us know if you think that there is, like, if you can think of counterexamples of propaganda that are not cases where you can frame things as good or bad just by the format. I'd be super interested to see that. Let's discuss all our examples of propaganda we can think of on Twitter, Reddit, maybe YouTube, Gmail, notdailypodcast.com. And see you later.
See you.